Hello, hello, hello. Today we've got a whole lesson on price elasticity, so let's get into it. Right, firstly then, this is what we're going to learn. We need to know the definitions, the calculations, the determinants, the revenue effect, the significance, the changes, all these things on the syllabus. All right, let's get started. What is elasticity of demand? Well, we need to know when we change the prices of something, how sensitive are you going to be about it? And a company is always trying to make money from you. So how do they do it? Let's work it out. First, we need a few definitions, very, very precise definitions. A numerical measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in the price of product. I change the price by 10%. Does demand increase by 10% or does it increase by 5%? These have significant ramifications for how much profit I'm going to make in the long run, or initially how much revenue I'm going to make. When it's elastic, it means a small change in price can have a huge impact on the demand of a product. When it's inelastic, it means a large change in price can have a very small change in the demand for the product. And we're going to look at different products and work out what's elastic, what's inelastic, and why. So if you want to copy any page in existence, this is the one that we need to have, okay? This basically tells you what the definition is. Lovely, we need that in the exam. It also tells us what the calculation is. And this simply means the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. So if I change the price by, let's say, 10%, I add 10% of the price, how much quantity demanded am I going to lose? You can see here that when price goes up, people tend to buy less. And if price goes down, people generally buy more. So this means the relationship is inverse. But basically in the exam, even though most answers should be written as a minus, for some reason in GCSE Economics, they sometimes like to write it as a positive. And this can frustrate a lot of students. So that's why I've just done this here, okay? So if they say it has a value of 2, it just means elastic, and it really just means minus 2. So if you see any numbers, just slap a minus on them and you'll be okay for PED, okay? We're going to look at each of these 5 variables one by one, okay? And I'm going to explain why each one has the value that it does. So let's get into it. So here's the graph. As you can see, this one's perfectly inelastic at number 5. As we move to number 4, we are inelastic, then unit elastic, elastic here, and finally perfect elastic. And we're going to go through each one, okay? So there's 2 vending machines right next to each other, both selling exactly the same items. If machine A is around 10% cheaper than machine B, what does that mean for all customers? There is an argument in economics that in this example, everyone would just buy A because it's 10% cheaper and it's exactly the same product and everyone has perfect information. Of course, this is not always the case. If it was me, for example, and I saw 10 people queuing for machine A and machine B was right there, for convenience, I just dropped the 10 RMB. This is what it looks like on a graph. The concept. It's an idea of perfection and it is kind of hard to replicate in reality, okay? It's a perfect example. But as we know in perfect examples, they tend to be extremes. So in this case, demand is here, all right? And it means that if price goes up even by 1%, no one at all buys this good or service. However, if price falls into this category, bang, everybody buys it. A lot of students tend to get confused by this. So the way I like to think about it is like, I'll draw another line here, okay, for demand, all right? And we know that the line operates on this gradient. So just imagine that the gradient shifts in this direction. So in this case, right, price goes up a little bit here. We still have some customers. If we move this gradient up even further, okay, and the price has gone up by the same amount, 1%, you see how many more customers we lose. Initially, we lost this many. Now we've lost this many, okay? And eventually, when we get all the way, we lose all of our customers when price goes above this red demand line. I hope that makes sense with the messy graph. And the equation looks like this. The percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in price. And in this case, the change in quantity demanded, if you go from 0 to anything, that percent change will be considered plus unlimited. So that's why we say it has an unlimited change. And in this case, I've just given an example of 10%. I could put 20, 30, 40. I could put any value here. And the answer would still be the same. We say the value is unlimited in this perfect example. Let me try and give you some more examples. Foreign currency exchange markets. Basically, you've got 10 banks on the go all at the same time. If one bank transaction fee is even a fraction smaller and you've got a few $1,000,000 to send, why not just go for the smaller one? Takes the same time, cheaper, why not? Happens all the time. Another example, if you've got 10 suppliers of corn and let's say they're produced in the same area, the same quality, everything's identical, the only difference is price, you're just going to get the cheapest one. Unless, of course, there's corruption. But in this perfect market, there's no corruption. Think about buying stuff online like USBs. Similar concept. There's so many of them flooded in the market. It's so cheap. Price goes up by a little bit. You'll just buy the other one. Now, moving forward, let's look at a gradient movement. In this case, we have elastic demand. So this is a more realistic example that we encounter in life, okay? So here's an example based on these numbers, okay? We have a minus 33% change in quantity that we can see here. We've moved from 6 to 4 with an 8% increase in price. So this is showing us that basically, not only is this an inverse relationship, we've got a plus and we've got a minus, so the answer must be a minus. It's also showing us that there's a greater percentage change in quantity than there is in price. So we've increased the price by just a little bit, 8.69%, but we've lost 33% of our customers. Wild. Very, very dangerous to do, isn't it, for a business if they've got elastic demand? That's why it's suggested they lower their price. So if they lowered it by around this price, they might get 33% more customers, depending on where they are on the line. So yeah, this basically just explains what I said. Customers are fickle. They change their ideas all the time. Here's an example, eating out. Depending on people's salary, of course. If prices go up too much, like they have in the UK recently, people are no longer interested in eating out. They'd rather buy the food and eat at home. This is especially true with McDonald's, where it's around £3 or £4 for a burger, but you can buy 4 ready-made burgers in a supermarket for £3 or £4. So that's what people have been doing. Competition has increased substantially from cooking at home. Other things, electronics. This year, many people have switched to Samsung phones instead of Apple phones. In recent years, Samsung phones haven't increased in price as much as Apple phones, and there's been a big exodus from Apple recently with people getting tired of the high prices for what they see as little improvements. Airlines is a big one. I know for a fact I'm super price sensitive to airlines. I'll just take whatever ticket's cheapest to get where I need to go. Even if it requires waking up at 4 a.m. and cost me twice as much for a taxi, I am getting the cheapest plane ticket. Next, unit elastic. You can see this is expressed as a curve. This is basically trying to represent the idea that if I lower the price by 10%, I will have 10% more customers. Or conversely, if I increase the price by 10%, I will lose 10% of customers. And it's consistent across the line. And that's why we have this situation. At GCSE level, they also like to argue that this leads to the revenue being the same. But the reality is the revenue is not exactly the same. I think it's an oversimplification of the idea. So yeah, in some older questions, it argues that revenue stays the same. But if you look at the maths, it doesn't always stay the same. So it's a tricky one for GCSE students to navigate. And I'm not sure what to say sometimes. Right, example. A movie ticket, 10% increase in price leads to a 10% decrease in sales. Books and magazines. They tend to be relatively unit elastic and relatively proportional. All right, let's move on to the next one. Inelastic price of demand. So basically it's showing if I increase a price by 28%, I'm going to lose 16% of my customers. Is that good for me as a business or bad for me as a business? Actually, it's pretty good for me as a business, right? Because this box, as we're going to learn later, is our revenue. And my revenue has shot up. That's because I'm not losing many customers for a massive increase in price. So businesses are going to love it if their product is inelastic. And it's usually due to a few reasons, like not having any other substitute products available, people are loyal to a certain brand, or it's like a habit-forming product. So in this example, you can see the value is between 0 and 1. If the value is between 0 and 1, it's considered inelastic. And notice I didn't put the minus sign there. I should put the minus sign there. So examples of this include cigarettes. They're addictive. Prices have gone up to around £20 a packet in the UK. Super expensive. Yet people are still buying them, and the government is raking in a lovely amount of tax. Public transport. People need to get to work in the morning if they don't have a car. Even if the prices are going up, like reported in Sheffield the other day. People are frustrated, yet they're still paying for the bus. Okay, so now we're moving on to the fifth and final one, perfectly inelastic. If you've got diabetes, you need insulin, right? So if 100 people are diabetic and they need insulin to live, and it's $5 a day, how many are going to buy it? Everyone's going to buy it. What about $1 a day? Everyone's going to buy it, 100 people. What about $10 a day? Again, 100 people. 50 a day. Everyone's going to buy it until they've got no money left because it's for survival. So this is why the graph looks like this. Prices go up considerably. You don't lose a single customer in this perfect example. So businesses can make absolute bank on this. So the maths of this is interesting because basically it doesn't matter what the price change is. It doesn't matter. The percentage change in quantity is always going to be 0, and therefore the answer is always going to be 0. Everybody's going to continue buying this. In reality, it would obviously taper off at some point, but this is a perfect example. And you know how economics loves perfect examples. So another example is baby formula for infants. People will keep buying it. It's what their digestive system needs. And life-saving medicine, as I've just said. Okay, moving on. Got a few questions for you. In the 1990s, Coca-Cola tried making vending machines that would change the price when the weather got hot. Wild. Got a few questions for you about this. Can you pause the video, have a look through these 5 questions, and see what answers you come up with? So for question 1, demand becomes more elastic or inelastic? Inelastic when the weather is hot. How does this strategy relate to PED? Well, we just said, didn't we? They wait for people to be thirsty, know that they're inelastic in their demand, and bang, push up the price. So they still buy it, and Coca-Cola get those lovely, delicious profits. Next, why did customers react negatively to it? Well, because they feel scammed. They see it as unfair. And because the group consensus is it's unfair, in the long run, Coca-Cola might lose total profit. It might completely backfire on them. Do any other businesses use these tactics for number 4? Of course they do. Think about car parks. Think about Uber during peak hours. Apparently EpiPen even has high price spikes. Concert or airline tickets. You try getting a last minute airline ticket, super pricey. And finally, number 5. What lessons can we learn from Coca-Cola? Don't rip people off. Even if demand is inelastic, the public perception does matter. And it might lead to negative advertising that leads to a lower demand overall and therefore lower profits. So they've got to be careful of their intangible product, which is their brand. Okay, next then. Can you take these 3 products? I'm going to show an increase in price for all of them. And can you choose where this should be on the graph? Pause the video. So out of choosing D1, D2 or D3, which one did we get for cigarettes? Which one did we get for petrol? You drive a car to work in the morning, petrol prices go up quickly. Do you have an alternative means of transport? Probably not. Not quickly anyway. So the chances of people buying it, again, are quite clear. So it's probably D2, inelastic. People are an inelastic buyer of petrol because there's very few substitutes available yet in the short term. What about toothpaste? What do we get for that? Elastic or inelastic? Well, when you go to the supermarket, is there hundreds of products of toothpaste? Is there lots of substitute products around? Absolutely. So that means you can be fickle with your choices. So a small raise in the price of this toothpaste will lead to a large reduction in consumers buying it. So this is considered elastic. And we can see that on the graph with a small increase in price leading to a massive reduction in consumers. And finally, cigarettes. Are they addictive or not addictive? They are absolutely addictive, and therefore they are inelastic. All right, that was the first class on PED. I hope you've got a good general understanding of the concepts now. If you're interested in buying my resources, you can do down below. All the best, and I'll see you again.